evening and welcome to Monday Night Politics, hosted by the Dallas Examiner newspaper. The Dallas Examiner does not endorse candidates, but we try very hard to inform our community so that when they go to vote, they are informed voters. Our moderator for tonight is Demetria McCain. Demetria is a Dallasite, and she has moderated Monday Night Politics numerous times. Demetria?
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, those of you who were with us last week. We are geared up and ready for this evening. So this evening races include Criminal Court of Appeals, places 3, 4, and 9, as well as the state representative race for District 113. If you're new to us, new to Monday Night Politics, well, welcome. We are very happy to have you. Just to review some of the ground plans. So the plan is this. Each candidate gets 2 minutes to do an opening, and they get 2 minutes to do a closing. There will be questions. I can pose some, but mostly I rely on you as an audience member to pose questions that you may have. And no matter the question, each candidate gets to reply to the question. If you have a question, please list it in the Q&A box. Type it there, not the chat box, but the Q&A box. And we will take a look at those and ask the candidates those questions. If in fact we find that there are several questions and we can't get to all of them within the confines of our 2 hours together, or the confines of that particular race, then we'll have to either edit the question, or perhaps you can ask the question directly to the candidate after Monday Night Politics, because we will be asking each candidate to post their emails, or not their emails, but to post their websites in the box for everyone to see. So I want to also point out that this event is on the platform of the Dallas Examiner, but it is made possible by many co-sponsors, many organizations, nonpartisan organizations within the community, including, well, I won't list them, but you probably saw at the beginning the slides, educational slides that were created by the Dallas Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, included all of the sponsors. We will also be running those slides, which include all the sponsors, at the end of our time this evening. So I want to thank Ms. Belt, I want to thank the Dallas Examiner, and you for allowing me to serve as your moderator today. We have our timekeeper, Christy Thomas. If you can just wave your hand, Christy. Candidates, Christy will be keeping time. She'll give you a warning, as well as you will hear a buzz or a noise, or actually a possible verbal statement saying that your time is up, just because we want to stay on track. And also our Zoom coordinator today is attorney Alyssa Patterson. If you can wave to the folks, she's here to help us with these technical aspects. And without further ado, I will tell you, let's see who we have here. We have, first we will, we have all candidates here. Just give me 2 seconds to make sure I've got folks here. Place 3 candidate, Elizabeth Frizzell is here, and she is running against Bert Richardson. Is Bert Richardson here? If so, please unmute your video. Okay, I see Judge Elizabeth Frizzell. So if our timekeeper is ready, we'll start with your 2-minute opening. Judge Frizzell, please go right ahead.
Thank you to the Dallas Examiner for just allowing me to speak and address you today and tell you a little bit about me and my campaign. I'm Elizabeth Davis Frizzell, and I'm running for Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, place 3. I've been practicing criminal law for the past 27 years. I've been a judge on every level other than the appellate level. I started as a municipal court judge. I've served as a judge for the city of Dallas, the city of Balch Springs, the city of Lucas, and the city of Princeton. I also have been a judge of county criminal court. I was the assault family violence judge for 8 years in Dallas County. I've been a criminal district court judge presiding over cases from 5 years to 99 years or life. Before I ever ran for elected office, I was in private practice for 13 years, and I tried every type of case: assault, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, kidnapping, everything from A to Z. I learned a lot during that time period. That was a lot of the reason why I decided to run for judge. I wanted to make sure that I made the system a little bit more fair for everyone that appeared in the court. At that time, I wanted to make it fair for my client, but I saw so many other defendants in the court that sometimes didn't get a fair shake from the judges. Well, that changed in '06 when I and 13 of my colleagues ran, and that was the first time Democrats won in Dallas County in over 25 years. They said it couldn't be done, and they're saying we can't turn Texas blue, not in 2020. Well, I say they're wrong. I say they're wrong now, just like they were wrong in '06. We can win this along with you. It's time for a change. There hasn't been a Democrat on the court that I'm running for, which this is the highest criminal court in the state of Texas, in over 22 years. Well, you know why? There hasn't been a Democrat to run for it in over 22 years. I'm here to help make that change. I want to make sure that justice is fair. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals hears all death penalty cases through direct appeal. It goes directly from the trial court, skips over the appellate court, and then goes up to Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Do you know anybody who didn't get a fair shake in their trial? I would be the one to review the papers of the appellate court judges and the trial court judges. And I want to make sure that it's fair for you, fair for all, not just for some. Judge Elizabeth Davis Frizzell for Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, place 3.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And do we have Bert Richardson here? Bert Richardson, have you joined us today? I don't want to overlook you. Okay, well, with that being said, we can start with some questions. So audience, please put your questions in the chat. You did explain to us, Judge Frizzell, about the, I guess, the authority of the particular court. And folks were here last week, you know, that we heard from candidate for the Texas Supreme Court. So in fact, to the extent that something is civil related, it goes to the Texas Supreme Court. But if it's criminal related, it does not go to the Texas Supreme Court. So we are talking about a court of last resort, right? Judge Frizzell, I know you can't respond or talk about how you could possibly rule on some hypothetical situation. But in your experience, what has been some of the things that you think that the court could enhance or do better? If you can respond to that, please.
I think one of the areas we need to improve on is disparate sentencing. I know a lot of times there's focus on people who are wrongfully convicted. And I understand that. I focus on that because I represented someone who was wrongfully convicted and served 16 years in the penitentiary for an offense he did not commit. He was later freed through DNA testing, but his life was never the same after that. But I also like to focus on people who may have committed the offense, but they get 60 years when they should have gotten 20. They get 20 years when they should have gotten probation, or they get the death penalty when clearly it was a life case. So I think we can improve in disparate sentencing in the way that we analyze cases. When you analyze a case, you have to look for whether or not there was harm in the trial. Let's say there was an error that's raised on appeal by a lawyer, and the lawyer is arguing, well, there was an error in the trial. You have to go further than that. You have to analyze whether or not that error was harmful error. Quite often, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals said, well, there was a problem with the trial. There was error, but it wasn't harmful error. I think we need to take a close look at that.
Thank you very much. So we have a question here about the makeup of the court. Could you talk a little bit about the makeup of the court, how many judges there are, et cetera, please?
Yes, there are 9 judges on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Of those 9 judges, do you know how many of them are African American? There are none. Do you know how many of them are Hispanic? There are none. Do you know how many of them are Asian? There are none. Do you know how many of them are Democrats? There are 0. There's not balance on this court. There's also no one with a significant defense resume like mine. I've been practicing criminal law for a total of 15 years. Started with the Department of Justice, then I opened up my own firm and started trying cases as a defense lawyer. I think it gives you a different perspective when you've been a defense lawyer, when you've been on both sides. All the prosecutors that I know that end up practicing defense law later, all of them agree with me that you get a different perspective. We need to bring that balance to this court. It should not be all of former prosecutors that are serving there. Few of them served a few months as a defense lawyer, but none of them have served 15 years. I bring that balance to this court. I think it's important because many times on appeal, the argument is ineffective assistance of counsel. Very seldom do defense lawyers file a grievance or file an appeal saying the prosecutor didn't do a good job. They say the defense lawyer didn't do a good job. I'm in the perfect position to say
All
whether or
right.
not
Thank
that
you.
Time up.
defense lawyer did their job.
Okay, so our next question is a little more detailed, and it asks about women on the court. Are there any female judges on this particular court?
Yes, there are some females. And it's interesting because now we have 6 out of 7 females running right now as Democrats for this highest court. There are 4 running for the Supreme Court, and there are 2 running for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. Judge Tina U. Clinton and I are both running, and also Judge Brandon Birmingham, which makes 3. I know he's not female, but I've tried cases in front of him, and I know he's fair. I want fair-minded people. I definitely want females. I definitely want African Americans as a judge. The predominant number of people that I had cases heard in front of me were African American males. Number 2 was Hispanic males. I think we need that voice from women. I think we need that voice from African Americans. I think our court should represent Texas. Texas is not all male. It's not all white. It's not all women, but I know it's more than 1/3 women. When you go out to vote, more than 50% of the voters are female. And I think it's time for us to make sure our judiciary reflects the population and citizenry of the state of Texas.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I believe we are now at the point where this will be pretty brief because your opponent isn't here. We're at the point where you can do your closing statements.
Okay, I started on this journey of criminal justice reform a long time ago. And I thought that if I could become the judge, I can make sure that everyone in my courtroom receives fair trials. I had one judge who ultimately made it to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, believe it or not, who told me I didn't need a hearing for my client because if the prosecutor said he was guilty, he was guilty. And I had to point him to the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure that required him to give my client a hearing. Well, when you have to force a judge to follow the law, that's not the judge that we want on the bench. And that judge is no longer on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. But there are many judges throughout the state of Texas that have that same mindset, that they forgot to take their prosecutor hat off when they headed to the bench. I had to remember to take my defense hat off when I headed to the bench because I think it should be fair to both sides. If you check my track record, prosecutors that have appeared in front of me, defense lawyers that have appeared in front of me, Republicans, Democrat, male, female, they'll tell you I just try to cut it straight down the middle. I want to be fair to the victim. I want to be fair to the defendant. And that's what my history has been. After 27 years, I think I'm in the perfect position to be able to preside over the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. It's time for a change. If you've heard about any of the high profile cases, many of the times when I go out and campaign, people ask me about the case of Ben Spencer. They asked me about the case of Rodney Reed, and they asked me whether or not justice was served in that case. I know I don't know all the facts, and I probably won't until I get to that court. But I do know that I'm going to be fair when I hear all of those cases, and that's all anyone wants. This is how we get to mass incarceration. When we have so many former prosecutors that make it to that court, we have so many Republicans and no Democrats to give a balanced view. It's time to change that. I need you to vote all the way up and all the way down the ballot. For me, Elizabeth Frizzell, for Judge Tina U. Clinton, for Brandon Birmingham on the criminal side. I need you to vote for all the Supreme Court justices because they will decide redistricting. It's going to get appealed. Have you ever asked that question about gerrymandering and how we stop it? I have. Well, here we are. Vote for all the people on the ticket. Judge Stacey Williams, Judge Kathy Chang, Gisela Triana, Amy Meacham, who's running for the chief of the Supreme Court. You have 7 people, and we're offering a service to you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We do appreciate it. And hey, folks, I want to make sure that you all are armed with all the information that you need to vote. So we're going to take a brief break and we're going to run the PowerPoint. If Attorney Patterson could help me out here. Thank you, Judge Frizzell. Take care.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to run the PowerPoint so you can get some of that information and take a look at some of our co-sponsors here tonight. And next up, we will be covering Criminal Appeals Court Place 4. So that'll be up after we run the PowerPoint here for us. All right?
It will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure.
All right, so we are now ready for place 4. Place 4, we have candidates Tina Clinton and Kevin Yeary. If you are here with us, please unmute your video and wave to our audience, please. Again, for place 4, Tina Clinton and Kevin Yeary.
I'm sorry, I can't open the video. It says I'm unable to.
All right, try it now.
Thank you. Hi.
Super duper. All right, Kevin Yeary, are you here with us? All right, well, Tina Clinton, you have 2 minutes for opening, and we'll take some questions. And audience, listen to what she has to say and get your questions ready.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who has sponsored. It's my pleasure to be with you tonight. My name is Tina Clinton, and I'm a 3-term elected Democrat. I sit currently in a district, felony criminal district court. My career has spanned 25 years in criminal law. I've been a defense attorney, I've been a prosecutor, I've been a municipal judge, I've been a county court judge, and now I sit on a felony criminal district court. And in those 25 years, and following the career path, what I've learned is how the criminal justice system works. And what you're missing on the highest criminal court right now are people who have worked their way through the criminal justice system. And that's so important because when you sit in a municipal court, you learn how to deal with people that are pro se, that may not have attorneys. When you sit on a county court, you deal with lower offenses that sometimes are the beginnings of people getting arrested, and you try to funnel them out of the criminal justice system. And when you're in a felony criminal district court, you learn about the heavier offenses all the way up to a capital murder. And as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, I've had the opportunity to work not only with victims, but also with defendants and their families, with people that are charged. Some of them who may be people that want to plea, and other people who want to try their cases because they're not guilty. And having that breadth of understanding of criminal law is what prepares me for this highest criminal court. And I'm honored to be your Democratic nominee for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, Place 4.
Thank you very much. Same question to you, Judge. What do you think is one of the biggest issues or biggest things that could be improved as it relates to the particular court for which you're running?
So I think one of the things that this court needs to do is that they need to write opinions, and they need to write opinions with differing opinions. Part of that, of course, is that they don't have differing opinions. You have 9 Republicans that are there. But for example, you have writs that are coming down where they are saying no to a review on a habeas corpus with no opinion attached. In addition, they need to review those writs more. There are about 5,000 cases, give or take an extra 1,000 or less than that. I mean, like, so 4,000 to 6,000 that come in on any given year. And those writs are the cases that are post-conviction, where case like U.S. v. Bobby Moore is coming from about intellectual disability, Lydell Grant, who's an actual innocence case, Cheney, who's an actual innocence case. All of these cases are coming through writs, and we need to make sure that we are reviewing them much more carefully, that we are giving them full attention, and that they are not getting dismissed without some rationale, because that's important not only to judges like me, but it's also important to attorneys that are dealing with these cases.
Thank you. Question: how would you compare the Texas system with the, as far as it relates to the Court of Appeals, to other states' Court of Appeals systems?
So we are very unique. We are one of two states, so it's us and Oklahoma, that have what we call a bifurcated high court. So as Judge Frizzell was talking about, we have, so you have the trial courts, that's the county courts that deal with misdemeanors, you have the district courts that deal with felonies, you have the JPs and the municipal courts, and they all funnel into an intermediary court that hears civil and criminal cases. That's the appellate courts. In Dallas, that's called the 5th District Court of Appeals, and they take cases from 6 counties. And then if you have a case out you want to appeal from that intermediary court, it goes to 2 high courts, the Supreme Court and then the Court of Criminal Appeals. The Court of Criminal Appeals only takes the criminal adult cases. Everything else goes to the Supreme Court. Here's the advantage in that. You have specialists that deal with these cases instead of a person who may have a civil background, but they're listening to death penalty cases or a writ. Instead, you have criminal practitioners who should have balanced ideas and experience, not only as lawyers, but also as judges, that should be sitting on that high court that can deal with these very, very life impacting cases. In fact, it's life or death, right? And so these cases need specialists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, audience, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. I believe that you have answered the questions that were pending, Judge. Real quick question here is, how many seats are currently open?
Yes. So they are 6-year terms. So anytime someone is elected, they have a 6-year term. And the way that they handle it, because there's 9 benches, every 2 years, 3 judges are up. So this cycle, there's 3 that are up. That's seat 3, seat 4, and seat 9. And then in 2 years, there'll be 3 more that are up. And then in 2 years after that, 3 more that are up. And so that's how they cycle. The only time that you have more than 3 that are up, or when, for example, when there is a gubernatorial appointment, then the very next cycle, they have to be on that, that election, and then they have to go back to whatever their normal cycle is. So on the Supreme Court side, you actually have 4 people that are on that ballot, and that's because one of them has to deal with an appointment that was made. So they have to go to the nearest election, that's this election. So normally you would have 3 on the Supreme Court, 3 on the Court of Criminal Appeals, unless there is an appointment process, and then those numbers go up from there.
Thank you very much, Judge. And now we are ready for your closing statement.
Thank you so much for having me. I do know that many of you are listening and you're wondering, I know that you're a Democrat, but what other reason do we have to vote for you? Not only do we have trial experience, which I think is pivotal in a case such as this, to understand what's going on in a courtroom, to understand why judges are doing what they're doing, but also what may be happening with defendants and with complainants. That kind of experience only comes from being in that seat, of being a judge of trial courts. But not only that, I want to tell you a little bit about my opponent. My opponent is the one that in an actual innocence case that was granted here in Dallas County, he said in a dissent that he believed that the standard for actual innocence was not sufficient. Let me put that in layman's terms. He thinks it ought to be harder for an individual to prove actual innocence. The standard for actual innocence is fairly high. And we all know from history that there are actual innocent people in jail, because we've seen them coming through Dallas County who has the highest rate of actual innocence cases in the nation. So to say that to make it harder for someone to prove actual innocence, well, I'll let you be the judge of that. And you can in turn let them know how you feel about that by actually going and voting. Don't just go and vote by yourself. Remember, you need to make sure that Texas turns out. Please take 15 friends, call them, make a plan. In a time of COVID, it's not enough that someone just says, I intend to vote. You need to have a plan to vote. What day do you go? What polling place? Make sure you take your masks, your hand sanitizers, be safe. But make sure that in this important historic year where your rights and the soul of this nation is at stake, that you don't just say, I'm going to go vote. Have a plan, and then execute that plan and make sure that when November the 3rd comes around and 7 o'clock dings, that we can all say that not only did we all do our very best, we turned out the vote and we made sure that this country was turning for the better, that Texans were going to protect each other's rights by making sure that you had judges who were for balance and for fairness and that were willing to make sure that people had their fair day in court. And that, my friends, is what we all can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. We want to invite you to include your website in the chat for the attendees. And we appreciate you and take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we are blazing through here. So next we have Criminal Appeals Court for place 9. The candidates for that particular office are Brandon Birmingham and David Newell. If you are with us, please unmute your video and we will get started. Let's see who's here.
Brandon Birmingham is here. Hi.
Okay, so Brandon Birmingham is with us. Do we have David Newell? All right, we do not, but we will not delay. Again, as I stated before, we begin with 2 minutes for opening. You will have 2 minutes for closing and 1 minute to answer any questions that are posed to you. So we are ready.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that we can't be here in person. This has always been my favorite event over at the African American Museum at the State Fair ever since I first did it in 2014 and 2018 and now here 2020. My name is Brandon Birmingham. It's an honor and pleasure to serve you as the judge of the 292nd Judicial District Court. That's my current bench now. But I didn't start out there, obviously. I was a prosecutor in Dallas for the better part of 13 years. And when I was up and coming, I worked for Craig Watkins, and I was proud to work for him. He changed the way that we looked at criminal cases in Texas. He changed the way that he redefined the word prosecutor. And I was honored to work on his conviction, his conviction integrity unit. I was honored to work on some exoneration cases and be one of his top trial prosecutors. And I got a lot of experience that way, and he supported me, and I became the judge, the Democratic nominee for the 292nd, the bench that I currently have right now. Over the course of my career as a judge, I've made sure that we end the pipeline to prison, that we end mass incarceration. I started a specialty court. I started a domestic violence court because I think there's really a better way of looking at these cases than just lock them up in law and order. My trial experience is what sets me apart. I have tried all of the cases that are going to come up in front of the Court of Criminal Appeals. I've presided over almost all the types of cases that are going to come up in front of the Court of Criminal Appeals. And to me, I think most people want to make sure that before you are sitting on the highest court in the land, that you have actually presided over some of these trials and that you've actually put them together, not just the low-level misdemeanor or low-level felony ones, but the hardest and the highest type cases that there are. And that's the type of prosecutor that I was. That's the type of trial experience I have. And that's how we've redefined the word prosecutor. What do I believe in? I believe that we should never stop searching for the truth and that everybody should have equal access to justice. Again, my name is Brandon Birmingham, candidate for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, place 9.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my tech folks to help me out here because I did get word that David Newell is present with us, but for some reason he's not showing up as a panelist. I'm not sure if he's signed in with a different Zoom link or not. But folks, if we can just take a pause here so that we can have the other candidate for this particular race to join us. Please just pause for a moment. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Birmingham, just to pause for a moment if you don't mind.
Mr. Newell, what is your name on your Zoom? What is your name showing?
If you can just hold tight, folks. We're actually running ahead of time. So I would suggest go take a water break and give us a couple of minutes to get this appropriately set up. We apologize.
We can launch the poll as well. Everybody take the poll.
On the merry-go-round, you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Ooh, mountain, we gon' walk it out and mountain. And I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, I like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Mountains, bring it to its feet. Mountains, and I'll rise up. I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up. I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. All we need is hope. And for that we have each other. And for that we have each other. And we will rise. We will rise. We will rise. We'll rise. I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, I like the waves. We'll rise up, in spite of the ache. We'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again.
We want to make sure that you all get a chance to hear all the candidates who have decided to participate in Monday Night Politics. So at this time, we're going to hold off on the Criminal Appeals Court Place 9. And if I have Representative Bowers here, I do believe, and do we have Will Douglas, who is also running for State Rep District 113 here? If the two of you would unmute your videos, we will move on to your race as we get candidate Newell set up for the Place 9 race. So if I have Retta Bowers and Will Douglas available, if you would unmute your video and just give us a wave, then we will be prepared to hear what you have to say to the attendees here today.
Hi, this is Representative Bowers. I am here, but cannot. Okay, let me see. It's giving me an option to start. Okay, there it is.
Okay.
Hi.
How are you doing? 2 more seconds. Will Douglas, are you here, Will Douglas? Okay, don't see anything. Okay, so again, same situation, 2-minute opening, 2-minute closing, and we'll take questions in the interim. So thank you for being flexible here, and go right ahead, Representative Bowers.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Demetri McCain, and to Monday Night Politics, the Dallas Examiner, for having me out tonight. It's always a pleasure to attend and be a part of Monday Night Politics, and especially in an exciting election year like 2020. I am State Representative Retta Andrews Bowers, currently the serving member in House District 113, which is far East Dallas County, Rowlett, Garland, Mesquite. We have parts of Walk Springs. We have parts of Sunnyvale, Seagoville, Combine, and a little bit of Dallas as well. And I just finished my first term in the 86th legislative session, where I was one of 24 freshmen, number 6 in my class, and proudly served on the House Committee for Corrections, for Juvenile Justice and Family Issues, as well as local and consent calendars, and was proud to have been one of a very few freshmen that did have the opportunity to serve on 3 committees. I came home having passed House Bill 3435, which made March 1st Texas Girls in STEM Day. I was really proud of that bill. We celebrated on March 1st with the Girl Scouts, and our office hit the ground running, helping the many constituents as we got home. I will go on to say that as COVID hit, we had rapid COVID response, and we did an SBA town hall right out. I did a letter trying to make sure that appropriate testing was brought to our district. It was a bipartisan letter. I also asked that proper data was collected so that we made sure that those most vulnerable were getting the resources they need. So we've been still serving the community as well as campaigning to make sure that I can go back to Austin. And so I again am State Representative Retta Andrews Bowers. I'm running for re-election for House District 113. I've lived here for 20 years in the district, and I'm so proud of that in 2020, and really ready to continue fair representation for our community. I had so many people upon returning home in the community just thanking me for how I stood up for our community in Austin, and made sure that I carried their voices with me to the Capitol. So I was really proud of my first term, and I'll be glad to give it back to you there because I think I'm out of time.
Thank you very much. So first and foremost, we have a lot of political geeky folks on this call, as well as some newcomers to Monday Night Politics. With that being said, it is pretty clear that this particular audience is very interested in the issue of redistricting. How do you see the position of holding the state representative spot in District 113 relating to the issues of redistricting?
Well, I mean, it's already been mentioned that there is such a thing as gerrymandering, and My district in particular is very much gerrymandered. There are plenty of people in the district right now that in previous election cycles, I ran in 16 and in 18, that tried to go and vote for me. People in the community that I've known for years, that our kids have gone to school together, our kids have been in band together. We've done many things together, but they could not vote for me because they were drawn out of my community. And so if the community and the lines were drawn properly, people could pick their representatives instead of political entities or legislators deciding who they govern and legislate for. So I just feel like we have to do better to make sure that people in the community, when we vote, we do vote in the fair representation that we're due, and we have to make sure that people can get the kind of representation that they want to send to the Capitol or even to Washington that's going to represent them and their ideals and values.
Thank you. A question in the chat here, or the Q&A box, I should say. Last session was a busy session for the legislature. What will be your priorities? Anything you haven't mentioned already? Go right ahead.
Wow, it was a busy session. It was called a Kumbaya session. I do think we got more work done, the budget being the one bill that we are required to pass. Going back in, priorities will be, of course, to look at how we manage to balance the budget, to make sure that we are fighting to make sure that HB 3 is sustainable, and that's the school finance bill. We put serious investments and did a great effort for our education system, and I want to make sure we can hold true to those investments and keep them there. It's going to be a tough job, but other things would be making sure we're providing quality access to quality health care, especially as we endure this pandemic and COVID-19, and also that we can decrease the racial divide that we endure.
Thank you. So next question relates to committee work. First of all, could you explain to our audience how the committees work in the state legislature and what committees are of interest to you?
Thank you for the question. I want you to know that the committee work we spend a lot of hours in committee hearings. We hear testimony from people all across the state. And as I said, I served on the House Committee for Corrections, which I will say I asked for. I had seniority placement on corrections because I did ask for it. I believe our state should be a second chance state. And I would like to go back and serve on corrections again. Juvenile justice and family issues is another committee that I served on that I asked for. I do feel like I got a lot of what I asked for going in. I felt like I could help our families, and I felt like some of the bills that I think I presented my first bill in the Juvenile Justice and Family Issues Committee, and it was to make sure that juvenile records could be expunged so that they could have a second chance, just because they had one misstep, that they wouldn't be really just totally penalized and their lives turned upside down and around. I was proud of that bill. And then local and consent calendars is the third committee, which is a powerful committee, largely because it makes sure that local bills are passed for your district and your community.
Thank you. And I think it's worth pausing here for purposes of information and education for the folks who are paying attention to this particular race. Or any of the state representative races. You mentioned that you asked for a particular committee. To whom do you ask? And I'm not sure that everybody understands how that process works.
Thank you. The speaker of the Texas House is the person that is given the task of assigning those committees, and he or she, I'll say, does have the wherewithal to work with his group or team to make sure that they're assigning us to the right committees. But you do get to ask for, I did have a 15-minute meeting with the Speaker of the House, and I was able to ask for the maybe 6 committees that I wanted to serve on, and to kind of put in your bid for why you want to serve on those committees. And like I said, I was one of very few freshmen that got 3 committees. And I do feel like I got 2 that I asked for and then some. So I felt like I felt like I had the right network and relationships to make sure that I was going to get committees that would support our district. And so that happened.
Thank you. And we have a question in the chat here. The question is, are you responsible for the new VA in Garland?
I am not responsible for the new VA in Garland. I do support Congressman Colin Allred, who is responsible for the new VA in Garland. If your question is about veterans, I am working with the Veterans Resource Outreach Center in Rowlett. We are working on naming a bridge, Heroes Bridge, that will have the dedication and celebration for, which is a bipartisan effort for our area this week. It'll be at the end of this week on Saturday, and that does support our veterans.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question here. Once the census is completed and counted and the district is enlarged, what effect will this have on the district? Would mean more representatives?
Well, that would be at the congressional level where we could get, with larger numbers in each of our districts, we would get possibly another congressional seat. But when we had been, I attended a redistricting meeting out in Arlington and was able to sit in on one of those. And we are, expecting, because the community and the district is growing and thankfully far more diverse, we could end up with more, but maybe not much more in our constituency. Right now we're at 172,000. We could have for the district close to 182,000 or so new constituents.
Okay. A couple of rapid fire things here, stream of consciousness things I'll throw at you. Medicaid, housing, disability. Your response?
So Medicaid expansion, I definitely am going to be for Medicaid expansion. Asked that question earlier today, and I do support it. I do believe it will help the Texas economy, but it'll also really help low-income families. We are the highest uninsured state, and most of the time, low-income families are the ones that are uninsured. I do believe that when I looked at some research, those families, there were very low percentages of families that were considered low-income families that said they wouldn't be willing to work if they had it. But the other thing I think that is alarming, when you don't have access to quality health care, you don't have a personal doctor or a physician that is primary care. And so when you look at preventive medicine, that is hard for people in Texas to achieve, the fact that they have a good primary care physician that can care for them all along, and they end up in our hospitals. So not expanding Medicaid will hurt our hospital systems as well. So I do believe we've got to fight for better quality, access to better quality health care. And I think the third part of that was disabilities, Demetria McCain.
Disabilities and housing.
Disabilities and housing. Well, there's my time.
Well, that was that 3-part question, so you've got a couple more minutes there.
Okay, so I do believe for housing, I just would have to say we do have quite a bit of affordable housing coming into the district. I was proud to have broken ground for some affordable housing with one of my colleagues earlier this year in House District 113 in Balk Springs, and I'm going to push for more affordable housing. We have had developers that have met with us in the Rowlett area, but we have to do better by our families. And in terms of disability, I just need to know what's being asked for that question.
It was a general question, so
okay,
nothing specific.
Okay, well, I guess I do support, I am an advocate for our families with disabilities and have been endorsed by the Disabilities Association. So I don't know what in general else you would want me to say or
that's
add
fine.
to that.
We have one final question for you, so that's fine. During your first year in Austin, did you find that the Texas House was more or less polarizing than you anticipated?
You know what? I will say I did find that it was less polarizing than what I thought. One thing that was made clear to us coming in as freshmen is that being in the Texas House and being effective in the Texas House is about relationships. It's about building those relationships, being able to work across the line, and having that foundation to make sure you can talk with your colleagues, move your bills through, be able to talk to those committee chairs to make sure you get your bills set for committee, get your bills moved through. That also takes talking to your colleagues. It's still reiterated here as we approach another session that we have to have a strong network and good relationships. I think I went in and was able to do that and will continue to grow that going back. But it was less polarizing. We're not Washington in Austin.
Thank you very much. We are now ready for your 2-minute closing statement.
Well, thank you so very much. Thank you to, again, the Dallas Molly Belt and the Dallas Examiner. Thank you to Dimitri McCain for always doing a wonderful job in moderating. I will say it's exciting to see so many people in this Zoom, so many people that are ready to vote. I do believe that we have to go in with a vengeance and make sure we vote in numbers to save this district, not only the district, and make sure we keep fair representation for all, but this state and this nation. I feel like I will have to say that I've lived here for 20 years this year. I'm truly invested in our community, connected to the community, and I'm really proud to say the people of House District 113 thanked me upon my return and continue to thank me on the doors as we try to talk to as many voters as safely as possible now for the representation they had. I'm excited about going back to what will be a very different session. We don't know what it's going to look like. We know we're facing a deficit, but I know working with my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, we will find the answers that'll be best for all Texans. When I stepped into serving as representative for House District 113, I had to find balance. I had to come in and work hard with both sides to make sure that I was giving the district the most fair representation possible. I think I've done that, and I will continue to do that upon re-election. I ask for your support. I thank you for having me tonight, and I'm going to leave my website in the chat.
Oh, then I don't have to ask you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.
No, thank you all. Thank you for having me, and everybody stay safe. Thank you, and be blessed. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.
All right, folks, guess what? We actually have Judge David Newell and Judge Brandon Birmingham ready for you. And I see that you're ready because we have questions already in the chat. We kind of teed it up before, but we're going to take a step back and we're going to start over because we realize some people are just now joining us. And so I am going to unmute their videos here. And they can give you guys a wave. All right, how exciting. We have both of them here. Sorry for those technical difficulties, Judge Newell, but I do want to thank Attorney Patterson for helping us out there, because I certainly couldn't help get you in. All I could do was put something in the chat. So yes, let's take a step back, and we're going to do 2 minutes opening each. We'll start with Judge Newell first, and then we'll go back to Judge Birmingham for his opening statement, even though some people may have heard it before, but we have new people who've joined us. And then we'll do questions and answers, and then we'll go to closing, all right? So if everybody could mute your videos except for Judge Newell, and we'll focus on Judge Newell. All right, Judge Newell, we have a timekeeper, and she'll be timing you, so take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I gotta admit, I'm illuminated and nervous being the only guy that showed up here from that's actually on the court right now. I thank you, the Dallas Examiner, for the opportunity to come in and speak with you, and all the technical difficulties have certainly rattled me, but I'll do my very, very best. The one thing I would sort of start off by saying is, look, I listen to a lot of things about people saying, you know, you want fairness on the court and you want people that have worked their way up, and I really fit those bills. I don't, just because I've got an R next to my name doesn't mean that I'm not either of those things. I started out as a line prosecutor handling a docket, handling misdemeanor cases, trying some felony cases. I'm not here to suggest that I'm the most experienced trial prosecutor ever, but I did do it enough to see the impact trials can have on the families and how it impacts the whole community. And that's something that has stayed with me. Prosecutor for 15 or 17 years. I've got a total of 20 years, over 20 years experience doing criminal cases, and I volunteered in extra work to do criminal appeals until the job in Fort Bend. They made a job for me to do criminal appeals in Fort Bend, and that's what the court does, is criminal appeals. And I did that in Fort Bend, and I went to the Harris County DA's office, and I'm board certified in criminal law and criminal law. And I guess if I would give you an example of what I would say as far as fairness is concerned is, when I was in Harris County, I actually had a case where I was doing the appeal for a conviction for a defendant who was a young African-American boy sitting in the back seat of a truck when two of his friends decided to commit a robbery. And they convicted him of aggravated robbery and engaging in organized criminal activity. And I had to fight everyone all the way up the chain to get the permission to argue that this boy deserved an acquittal, because I didn't want that case to follow him for the rest of his life. And I won with my colleagues. I persuaded them to do it, and I went to the Court of Appeals and did enter an acquittal, finding the guy, finding him not, finding that the evidence was legally insufficient to show that he had done anything to assist in the robbery. So that's the kind of thing I brought, and that's one of the reasons I ran for judge, is because I wanted to make sure that people like me would be in a position to make those decisions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And if you'll just mute your video, and we'll go over to Judge Birmingham.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess I'll start with the reason why I ran. I was a in the trenches prosecutor. And I got the sense by talking to people and jurors, by talking to folks out in the community, and by reading all of the articles, about reading and studying the law and teaching the law, that the Court of Criminal Appeals had become inflexible and out of touch. And I didn't like that. I wanted to make sure that everybody got a fair shot. And when I was a prosecutor, I did that. I've never worked on a case or been part of the prosecution team where a person was later exonerated. I've never been a part of a prosecution team where a person was declared unfit for execution by the Supreme Court of the United States. I've got a long track record of cases that I've handled, and I can say that. As a judge, I've actually presided over these trials. Fundamentally, the Court of Criminal Appeals wants to make sure that what happens in a courtroom is fair. My experience sets me apart in that regard. I think that most people want to say that if you're going to be the judge on the highest court in the land, that you should have presided over some of these cases first. I've done that. Never had a jury trial been overturned on appeal. None of the cases where I've presided over as a judge have been overturned on appeal because they were wrongfully convicted or innocent of the charges. I came up at a time when we were reinventing the word prosecutor. We were truth seekers. There's one thing I learned, it's that the truth always will set you free, and that a prosecutor has the responsibility to make sure that all of the evidence is brought forth before a final decision is made, and that we should never have doubts or let them linger about a conviction or about the punishment. And I practiced my entire career that way, and that's what I want to bring to the Court of Criminal Appeals when I review all these cases and all these trials. Again, my name is Brandon Birmingham. It's a pleasure to be your Democratic nominee.
All right, thank you. So if you can both unmute yourselves, we'll do some questions here. I already have some teed up from our attendees. You will each get a chance to answer both questions, and I will begin in the reverse order. So the first person responding will be Judge Birmingham. So the first question is from one of our listeners: why does criminal sentencing differ when both criminals are of the same age and it's their first offense? So we're talking about first-time offenders who are the same age, and the only difference is their race. All right, we'll take it from you first, Judge Birmingham.
Well, you think you hit the nail on the head. Access to justice is a tremendous problem in our state, and I've seen that firsthand. I wanted to make sure that we did not have disparate sentencing when I was a prosecutor making recommendations on cases. Now that I've been a judge and handed down sentences, unfortunately, in some circumstances now for the last 6 years or whatever it is, and however many hundreds of cases I've decided, you have to make sure that the law treats everybody the same. Unfortunately, the Court of Criminal Appeals has been loath to say that a sentence in one case, even though all of the other variables are the same, is that there's a good reason why a sentence is much higher in another case. I want to review that. I want to make sure that everything that happens in a case is fair to both sides, that the only reason that a case is the way that it is and ends up the way that it is because of the facts as they're presented fairly and the law applicable to the case, not with regard to race, color, creed, or access to resources or any of those other variables that we need to eliminate from the equation.
Okay, Judge Newell.
Yes, I agree. I don't believe that there should be disparate sentencing. I believe the law should be colorblind. We should be making the same sentences without regard to color. And I certainly have not engaged in any sort of decision making based upon the color of someone's skin. That's just not a part of the calculus I engage in. So the suggestion the court is loath to do that is a little bit misleading, at least applied to me. The thing you need to understand, though, is that the Court of Criminal Appeals is sort of reviewing the discretion of trial judges to engage in sentencing, and that's what we do. And so there are parameters that allow us to make those determinations as long as the legal argument for doing so has been set. And I have shown in my career that if the law requires me to say that a sentence is disparate or that a sentence should be upheld, then I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to take that chance. I can certainly point you off the top of my head a case where a defendant got a death sentence, and we actually felt the evidence was insufficient with regard to kidnapping, which was one of the elements of his death sentence. And I said that we had to go back and sentence him back to murder. It was a case called Griffin versus State. So I've had to do that in really, really tough cases. So thank you very much. I guess I'm out of time.
Thank you. Okay, so actually you kind of teed up the next one, and we'll begin with you, Judge Newell, for the next question. It says the question deals with the death penalty. I am concerned about the lack of flexibility from the High Court when it comes to taking a defendant's life. I'm curious to know what experience, if any, either of you have in trying death penalty cases. So we'll start with Judge Newell, and then we'll move to Judge Birmingham.
Okay, well, the first thing I would say is that while I don't have any experience trying death penalty cases, having worked in the Harris County District Attorney's Office and the Fort Bend County District Attorney's Office as one of their appellate prosecutors, I actually have to go in and participate in the trial even though I don't call witnesses, because I'm there to advise them on the important legal issues. And I've done that on a number of cases. And in fact, there are plenty of times where the prosecutor expects me to explain the laws of the family of the victims and things of that nature. So it's a very integral part. That's one of the reasons why at the end of the day, I'm not able to participate on some of the cases that have come before the court. With regard to flexibility of the death penalty and the court's inflexibility on the death penalty, I can point to my record to say, look, even just this last week, we actually commuted a death sentence to life in prison because the defendant had actually been declared intellectually disabled or been found to be intellectually disabled. I've never hesitated to do things like that. If there's a problem with the sentence, I'm certainly going to reverse it. I believe that I've been very flexible. I think my record shows that.
Judge, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't talk over anybody. I've participated in 4 death penalty cases, 3 as the lead prosecutor and 1 when I was assisting Mr. Watkins and his team. I think, what's interesting about my experience is that, yes, I participated in those, but it's not like everyone that crossed my desk, I was just eager to go get the death penalty on. I've said no and been a part of that very conversation where we do take into account whether you're even going to go forward on a prosecution for the death penalty. The prosecution holds all the power in the world in that regard. They're the ones who get to decide whether to move forward or not, and they have to do so only after they know all the facts and all the evidence. All the death penalty cases that I've handled, none of them have come back because the person was wrongfully convicted. None of them have come back because the person was innocent. The only one that came back was because the Court of Criminal Appeals had laid forth a case called Brasenio, which went against science, and it messed the case up for the victim, the victim's family, and that case ruined and poisoned, as the Supreme Court of the United States said, that prosecution. That poor family had to go through that case for decades, part of which is because of the Court of Criminal Appeals. I promise you I won't ever let that happen. I've got to stick to science, and that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's see, I've got a couple of things here. But first, I think I'll take the next question. which kind of relates to something we discussed last week when we were looking at the state Supreme Court. The question was, what area will you be serving with this particular bench? So actually, this is a statewide position. You may hear place 3, place 4, place 9 that we've had here before us today, candidates from those places, but that simply relates to there are 9 judges on that court. It doesn't relate to any geography in particular, so that kind of addresses that question. So the next question, we'll begin with Judge Birmingham and move to Judge Newell. The question in the box is, Dallas and Harris County have had success in electing progressive judges, but statewide changes have been a problem. How are you making sure your candidacy is getting attention? So I guess the ultimate question is, how are you making sure the public knows about the position for which you're running?
Did you say, ma'am, you're going to start with me?
Yes. Judge
I wish I could tell you, you know, I've got a bunch of TV ads and all this and that, but I don't have that kind of money. This is how I'm doing it. I've never said no to a Zoom meeting. I'm so proud of you all for doing this, but the Dallas Examiner has always done this, let's be honest. I'm just trying to spread the word and tell people to look at some of these cases. I don't know about you, but I hear about cases all the time where, you know, the court has done some things. Maybe you all remember there was a lawyer who slept through trial and somehow that conviction was okay. There was another one where the courthouse doors were shut early at 5 o'clock, knowing that a death penalty appeal was coming. I think that has eroded the trust in the judicial system and in the court system here in Texas. So the Court of Criminal Appeals got reversed, as I said, in ex parte more, and they got reversed again just recently on another case out of the Supreme Court about ineffective assistance of counsel. The bottom line is that the facts and the law have to guide these decisions. And what y'all are getting when you're voting on these judges is their wisdom and their judgment. And only good wisdom and judgment can come from experience, tried and true in the trenches, firsthand experience.
Thank you. Judge Newell.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you need someone who's experienced at the kind of work that the court is doing. And that's why I think I'm the best candidate. I mean, I certainly have, not only do I have experience in trying cases and things of that nature, but I also have experience in the exact area law that the court actually does. I mean, sure, there's a lot of really bad stories at the Court of Criminal Appeals about things the mistakes they've made. But even ever since I've gotten on the court, I've been trying to do everything I can to change the course of the court. In fact, first the death penalty case Liscano, which was decided last Wednesday, was a case I originally dissented to back in April of 2015 when I just got on the court, because I believed the standard that was being used, the Bresenio standard, was so wrong. Texas abandoned so that we could use modern clinical standards for determining intellectual disability. So I've been consistent in that regard. And in fact, I've also been very consistent in trying to overturn wrongful convictions. I think, as you've heard from one of the other panelists, that there's a judge on the court that thinks we should raise the standard. Well, I've been fighting against that very thing, and I've been doing it ever since I got on the court. So I think that's why I think
Thank you. I think I have another question here in one of my other boxes. Let's see. I don't see it appearing just yet. Okay, so with that being said, we can move on to closing. And so we'll start, oh, hold on a second. I have to scroll up. Okay, question. Sorry, gentlemen, question. You're not off the hook just yet. Question, what qualifications in education and character are needed for this position?
Who goes first?
We'll start in reverse order. So I believe we'll start with Judge Newell.
Okay, what qualifications and character are needed? I think I've given you an example of my character, but I definitely think that you need qualifications that deal not only with trials, but also specifically with criminal appeals. You need a broad base of knowledge, because there's a whole area of law when you haven't even done a criminal appeal that you're just not familiar with, that have to do with the way that you look at certain cases when they're reviewed. It's not a situation where you can sort of pick up the job and learn how to read and write and research and all of those kinds of things, and you're just reviewing a record. There's a whole area of law devoted to this, and that's why I think you need to look at. I'm board certified in criminal law and criminal law, appellate law, which means I have all the kind of experience that you would want with regard to this position, in addition to the on-the-job experience that I've had for the past 5.5 years.
Thank you. Judge Birmingham.
Well, over the course of my career, I've been a teacher, a lecturer to judges, prosecutors, police officers, defense attorneys, over 70 hours of continuing legal education. I'm a professor of law at Southern Methodist University, where I teach a course that I created called Circumstantial Evidence in Murder Cases. The sole purpose of it is to make sure that these students who are coming up and trying these criminal cases don't get it wrong. These are lessons that you can only learn by being in the trenches. And I think, do I have the chops, I guess, to be an appellate judge? Well, I've had the chops to be a prosecutor. I've been able to gain the reputation of never having any of my cases reversed as a judge for any of those trials. And I am continually sought out as an expert in my field, and it's an honor and a pleasure to do that. You all are not going to vote on a judge for this bench because of his ability to write. You're voting on him or her because of their ability to have good, sound judgment given all the facts and circumstances. Writing is something that can be acquired and improved on in time.
Thank you. Okay, so last question, which is somewhat informational. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the rate of cases being overturned? What is the current rate of cases being overturned, and what is your opinion about that rate? Is it acceptable, not acceptable? Is it the norm? And so we'll start with Judge Birmingham.
Well, I don't know an exact statistical number. I know that the Court of Criminal Appeals has been reversed very frequently in their death penalty litigation by the Supreme Court of the United States. And that's something that I find to be unacceptable. If you're asking about the rate of being overturned, I got overturned once on a procedural matter, and I made a mistake, learned from it. But that was one of hundreds of decisions that I've made as a judge. Some of the cases that I handled as a prosecutor were affirmed by the Court of Criminal Appeals and even Judge Rule. So I don't think that there's been any problem there. But I don't know the statistical numbers for how many cases that there are. The Court of Criminal Appeals is one of discretion. They don't have to review all the cases except for the death penalty cases, but they get to pick and choose those that are reviewed. And I think that, a statistical number I couldn't give you.
Thank you. Judge Newell.
I'm in the same boat. I can't say that I think that it's been, that there's what the statistical number is. I think that, as far as being reversed, what I understood the question to be is when the lower courts are reversed. And I guess I would just try to emphasize to you that the one big difference that people don't seem to understand about the appellate system is all the burdens and presumptions favor the defendant until he's convicted. And once he's convicted, then there's a great number of presumptions and burdens that flip, that make it much harder for him to overturn, which is one of the reasons I told you the story about the juvenile respondent and why it's such a big deal. Because it is very, very hard to overturn a conviction once somebody's been convicted, because we defer to the juries, we defer to the trial court. That's the reason why many judges aren't overturned all the time, because we have a presumption of regularity. I don't know that I can say whether it's a good or a bad thing. I can only say that, again, when I see a case that I feel that needs to be overturned, I'm more than happy to do that, because I think it's the right thing to do. And I think my record shows that I'm willing to do that.
Okay, so this will be the last question before closing. And this question will begin with Judge Newell. The last question in the box is, if justice is supposed to be blind, how do we get it wrong sometimes? If justice is supposed to be blind, how do we get it wrong sometimes? How or why, you might say.
Well, I guess if I would have to say something, I don't know that, like I said, I don't consciously make decisions with regard to, particular outcomes or things like that. But I guess if I would have to say, the thing that you need as a judge is something that I do all the time, which is you have to constantly question yourself. You got to question your assumptions. If you've got implicit assumptions, unconscious biases, things of that nature, you've got to constantly question whether you're getting the answer right. I'm not sitting here to tell you that I have a lot of experience doing this. And I'm a lecturer too. I've been doing that for over a decade as well, for the state bar, defense lawyers, prosecutors, police officers. And even then, there's still more for me to learn. And so I try to make sure that I consider whether or not I've gotten the answer right. That's about the only thing that you can do. But if there was a thing that I was going to say that leads to that where justice isn't blind, it's probably ego and not being willing to question your own assumptions.
Thank you. Judge Birmingham.
Well, it's because we are rigid in the way that we view the lessons from the past. If we learn, it's impossible to say, and it's inaccurate to say that we learned one thing from all those DNA exonerations that we had even here in Dallas County. We learned a great deal about what's now referred to as junk science. How do we know it's junk science? It's because DNA taught us that. And we're still holding on, at least some parts of the state are still holding on to those antiquated assumptions. Science does rule. We cannot forget to learn the lessons of the past. Ineffective assistance counsel still poisons some of these cases and some of these trials. Bad, flawed eyewitness testimony does. And then from the Court of Criminal Appeals, letting procedural roadblocks block the way that we're going to test evidence in cases. Should we retest something? What if you discover some DNA evidence, or some DNA evidence wasn't tested from before and it's relevant to the crime? Well, that should be tested. What if DNA evidence has come and shown that some of the eyewitnesses were untruthful? Well, that should be tested, and that should be brought out. I think that we've taken a very rigid view with these procedural roadblocks. And here's the thing: when we talk about the law being black and white, there is a gray area.
Thank you.
Discretion should take care of
that. Thank you. So next response is Judge Newell. We are now at closing, I believe. You both answered the last question, yes?
Sure, closing?
Yes, closing. That'll be not in court, but a 2-minute closing as a candidate.
Okay.
All we're talking about here, just 2 minutes here.
I'll do my best. I'll do my best. I just want to thank you all very much for taking the time to listen to me. If you check out my website, you can learn more about me, keepjudgenewell.com. I'll put it in the chat. But I want to say that all this discussion about the rigid and the inflexibility of the Court of Criminal Appeals is not me. And if you look at my record, you'll see that that's not me. I'm constantly fighting against overly rigid preservation or procedural hurdles to make sure that we get to the merits of claims. I'm constantly trying to make sure that we let actual innocence, we make sure to declare someone actually innocent when they've been wrongfully convicted. And that's something that we fight with. It's not right to say the court is all monolithic and it says the same thing. It doesn't. I'm one of the people that is fighting for that dynamic viewpoint of the court, and I've been doing it since I got on the court. And so you can look at my opinions in Ex parte Mayhew for actual innocence. You can look at my opinion in Ex parte Cheney. I'm the only one that wrote in Ex parte Kelly, which is the subject of the Outcry documentary on Showtime. Okay, I've been very, very consistent about these things. And so I just would ask that you consider me carefully and fairly. And thank you so much for your time. And please don't forget, David Newell, I'm on the Court of Criminal Appeals, Place 9.
Thank you. Please put in the chat your website. And Judge Birmingham, your closing statement, not as long as court, but just 2 minutes, please.
I promise I won't take that long. I just want to say it's an honor and a pleasure to serve you all as the elected judge of the 292nd. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and I'm humbled every time I put on the road. You all know me. You know the things that I've done in my court. You know the type of experience that's put me on the right side of history on this. As a prosecutor, when we defined what that term really and truly meant, that when we defined what a prosecutor was, that we created the Dallas County prosecutor that was one that never stopped searching for the truth and never stopped searching for justice in a case and always did the right thing. My record has shown that. So I want to just tell you one more time that I'm proud to be your candidate. None of my people have ever been innocent, have been convicted. None of my people have ever been shut down by the Supreme Court of the United States. And it's because you have that tried and true in the trenches experience and good judgment. That's what I promise to bring to the Court of Criminal Appeals. Once you all get out and vote, get a plan, grab your people, take them to the polls, as many as you can. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you both. Audience, this is virtual hand clap from everybody, because it takes a lot to run for office. You don't get rich in these positions, so thank you both for running for office. So we'll look for your websites in the chat, and thank you again for being here. You take care.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, listen, that's it for today. We've been pretty streamlined today, but we will be back next week. And I do encourage you to stay for 30 seconds or a minute so that you can see the PowerPoint that gives you a little bit of voter education as you create your plan, you might say. That's been going a lot on the website. And also, why don't we just keep in our minds the most recent passing of Justice Ginsburg. During some of the earlier races here, we saw females actually running. And so Justice Ginsburg, I will take personal pleasure and say, has done a lot as it relates to women in this country. So she deserves a couple of moments to think about the work that she has done over the course of not just as a justice, but the work she did as a lawyer. to affect women and women in the workplace. And also some of her writings as a justice spurred legislation on behalf of women. So again, thanks for being here. We look to see you next week. And we will now move on to our PowerPoint with some educational information that we want you to take back to your friends and family as we get ready for a race that's not just about the President of the United States, right? We are learning that there's a lot at stake in these races that goes down, obviously, to other positions that people are running for. So again, thanks a lot. Take care, and I'll see you next Monday.